I need to check the names to avoid, then write the story. The names to avoid: Claire, Daniel, Marcus, Carol, Nora, Ruth, James, Vanessa, Lydia, Thomas, Gregory, Priya, Eleanor, Diana, Arthur, Kevin, Patty, Henderson, Detective, Serena, Olivia, Mitchell, Faye, Brennan, Warren, Aunt Ivy, Brandon, Becca, Sandra. New names I'll use: Mara, narrator; Colin, husband; Jesse, sister; Paul, stranger who helps; Nina, husband's mistress; Judge Webb, etc. I've been married for 8 years. 8 years of making coffee together in the morning, of knowing exactly how he takes his 2 sugars, no cream, of thinking I knew every corner of the man I'd chosen. I was wrong about all of it. My name is Mara. I'm 31 years old. I run a small floral design business out of our garage in Asheville, North Carolina. I have a younger sister named Jessie who has been trying to tell me something for the last 2 years. I didn't listen. I wish more than anything in this world that I had. This is not a story I ever thought I would be telling, but I'm telling it because maybe someone reading this is in the same place I was, comfortable, trusting, and completely blind to what was sitting right across the breakfast table from them every single morning. The morning it happened was a Tuesday in October. I remember because the maple tree in our front yard had finally turned completely red overnight, and I stood at the kitchen window for a moment just looking at it. One of those small, ordinary moments of happiness. I took a picture of it on my phone. That photo is still there. My husband, I'll call him Colin because I still can't say his name out loud without feeling sick, had offered to drive me to the train station. I was heading to Charlotte for a 2-day bridal expo. My business had been growing. I had 3 consultations lined up. I was excited. He made breakfast while I packed my samples into the rolling case. Scrambled eggs, orange juice, and a travel mug of coffee, already prepared, lid screwed on tight. "You're going to need this," he said, and he smiled at me the way he always used to when we first got married. Warm, deliberate, like he was really seeing me. I kissed him on the cheek. I took the mug. We drove to the station, mostly in silence, the comfortable kind, or what I thought was the comfortable kind. He carried my case to the platform. He hugged me. He said, "Text me when you get in." Then, as I was stepping toward the train doors, he leaned close. His lips were near my ear, and he said, very quietly, "By the time you reach Charlotte, you won't be able to remember how to ask for help." I turned around. He was already walking away. I stood there on the platform with the travel mug in my hand and told myself I had misheard him. I told myself it was a joke. A weird, stupid joke. Colin had a strange sense of humor sometimes, the kind that didn't land. That had to be what it was. I got on the train. I drank the coffee. I don't remember arriving in Charlotte. I don't remember getting off the train. I don't remember the station, or the taxi line, or checking into the hotel. What I've been told is that a woman named Deb, a retired ER nurse from Gastonia who was on the same train, noticed me slumped against the window seat and couldn't rouse me properly at the terminal. She thought I was having a medical episode. She flagged down a station employee. They called an ambulance. I woke up in a hospital room in Charlotte with an IV in my arm and a nurse writing something on a clipboard at the foot of my bed. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what day it was. For a few very long minutes, I didn't know my own last name. I knew my first name. I knew I had a sister. I kept saying Jessie to the nurse over and over, and she kept saying, "Okay, honey, is that someone we can call?" They found my phone in my jacket pocket. They called Jessie. What I didn't know yet, what I had no way of knowing, lying in that hospital bed, was that back in Asheville, Colin had already filed a report. Not a missing persons report, a welfare check request for a woman he described as emotionally unstable, who he said had stopped taking her medication and had a history of dissociative episodes. I have no history of dissociative episodes. I have never been on psychiatric medication in my life, but he'd already started building the story. Jessie drove 2 hours from Raleigh to reach me that afternoon. When she walked into the room, she looked at me for a long moment before she hugged me, and when she pulled back, I saw that she had been crying in the car. She's 3 years younger than me, my sister. She's practical and sharp and doesn't cry easily. The fact that she'd been crying in the car told me more than anything else did. "I need you to listen to me," she said. I know you've heard this before. I know you didn't believe me, but I need you to listen to me right now. She had been trying to tell me for 2 years. It started when she was visiting us for Thanksgiving and went downstairs for water in the middle of the night. Colin was in the kitchen on his phone. When he saw her, he ended the call immediately. He said it was work, but Jessie saw his face before he had time to rearrange it. She said it was the face of someone who had been caught, not interrupted. She didn't say anything to me that trip. She told herself she could be wrong. 6 months later, she saw his car parked outside an apartment complex in downtown Asheville on a Saturday afternoon when he'd told me he was golfing with a friend. She drove by twice. The car didn't move. She took a photo. She showed me that photo 11 months ago. I told her she was imagining things. I told her Colin and I had been through a rough patch and we were working on it. I told her that her instinct to protect me was coming from love, but she was wrong this time. She wasn't wrong. Her name is Nina. She's 26 years old and works at the architecture firm where Colin had been a project manager for the past 4 years. I found this out later, in pieces, the way you find out everything when the version of your life you believed in starts coming apart. But that afternoon in the hospital, I wasn't thinking about Nina yet. I was thinking about what Colin had said on the platform. I made Jessie sit down and I told her, word for word. She went very still. "Mara," she said. "He put something in that coffee. The toxicology results took 48 hours. Jessie sat with me for most of it. She slept in the chair next to my bed the first night. I kept waking up with my heart pounding, a specific kind of disorientation that I can only describe as not being able to trust your own thoughts, like reaching for a memory and finding the shelf empty. The results came back positive for a sedative compound, high concentration, enough to cause significant cognitive impairment and memory disruption, especially in someone my size who wasn't expecting it. The attending physician used the word intentional. That was when I finally understood that my husband had not made me coffee that morning as an act of love. He had made me coffee as a way to end me quietly. Or at least to end me in a way that would be hard to trace back to him. Get me on a train, disoriented, no memory, no ability to ask for help. If Deb hadn't noticed me, if she had just stepped off the train and gone about her day, I don't let myself finish that thought very often. Here's something I want to say clearly because I have spent a lot of time being angry at myself. I was not stupid. I was not weak. I was a woman who loved her husband and chose, repeatedly, to believe the best of him because the alternative felt like losing everything I had built. That is not stupidity. That is what love does to your judgment when someone is very good at performing loyalty. Colin was very good at performing loyalty. He called Jessie's phone while I was still in the hospital. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice measured and concerned, saying that he was worried about me, that he wanted to come to Charlotte, that my family didn't need to make this into something it isn't. Jessie played it for the detective who came to take my statement. The detective listened to the whole thing without changing his expression. He doesn't know yet that she talked, the detective said afterward. He still thinks this is going to look like a medical episode. By then, I had already given them the travel mug. I had kept it. I don't even know why, maybe some instinct. It was just still in my bag. And when Jessie drove me to the police station 3 days after I was discharged, I handed it over in a plastic bag like it was something dangerous, which of course it was. The residue in the mug was consistent with the compound in my bloodstream. Colin was arrested on a Thursday morning. He was at home when they came. Jessie told me later that he reportedly asked the officers very calmly if he could call his attorney first. Of course he had an attorney. I want to tell you about the part that hurt more than anything else, more than the poisoning, more than Nina, more than finding out that he had taken out an additional life insurance policy on me 14 months earlier without mentioning it. The part that broke me open was the night I finally went back to our house. I hadn't been there since I left for the train station. Jessie drove me. We walked through the front door and the kitchen was exactly as I'd left it. Dishes in the drying rack, mail on the counter, the little cactus on the windowsill that I'd had for 6 years. Everything identical to the morning I'd made coffee and not made coffee, and stood looking at the red maple tree. I stood in the kitchen, and I thought, he stood right here. He stood at this counter with this mug, and he measured something into it, and he handed it to me, and he smiled. I sat down on a kitchen floor. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time. Jessie sat down next to me. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand on my arm. That is the truest thing I can tell you about those weeks. The silence of her sitting on the floor beside me. The investigation took 4 months. I learned things in pieces during that time that I had to keep integrating into a story that kept refusing to hold a clean shape. Colin and Nina had been together for 3 years. Not 4 months. Not a brief thing. 3 years. She knew about me. She had been to our house. I found out from her phone records, which the prosecutor's office shared with my attorney, on at least 2 occasions when I was traveling for work. The life insurance policy had been taken out quietly through a separate broker. The beneficiary was Colin. There were also text messages. I was not shown all of them, and I'm grateful for that. But I was shown enough to understand that there had been conversations about timelines, about patience, about once everything is settled. Nina claimed in her own interview that she hadn't known what he was planning, that she thought once everything is settled meant a divorce. The prosecutor believed her mostly. She was not charged. I have complicated feelings about Nina. I don't have the energy to hate her the way people seem to expect me to. She was 24 when they started. She was not the one who stood on a train platform and whispered something terrible in my ear. That was the man I had chosen. That was on him. The trial was in March. I sat in that courtroom for 9 days. I wore the same gray blazer 3 of those days because it was the only thing I owned that made me feel armored. Jesse sat beside me every single day. My mother flew in from Phoenix and sat on my other side. They flanked me like they were daring the room to touch me. Colin's attorney tried several things. He argued that the toxicology results were inconclusive. He argued that I had a history of anxiety, which was true. I have anxiety. I take a low-dose medication for it, and I was furious at how that was used, and suggested that my cognitive symptoms could be explained by an interaction with my own prescriptions. He argued that my sister had always had a contentious relationship with her brother-in-law, and her testimony was colored by bias. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Guilty on the charge of administering poison with intent to harm. Guilty on the charge of insurance fraud. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a very quiet voice, sentenced Colin to 14 years. 14 years. I sat very still when they read it. I didn't feel what I thought I would feel. I thought I would feel relieved. I thought I would feel relieved. I thought I might cry. What I actually felt was a kind of vast, exhausted quiet, like a storm that had been building for so long that when it finally broke, all you could do was stand in the aftermath and look at what was left. I looked at the side of his face when they let him out. He didn't look at me. I am writing this from my apartment in Raleigh. I moved here 6 months after the trial to be closer to Jesse. I brought the 6-year-old cactus. I left almost everything else. My business is still going. Slowly, but going. I had a wedding last month, a big one, a ballroom full of peonies and ranunculus, and standing there looking at what my team and I had built for someone else's beginning, I felt something that I can only describe as stubborn. I am still here. I am still making things. I want to tell you what I know now that I didn't know before. Not as a lesson, because I hate when stories are wrapped up into lessons like they're neat packages, but just as something true. The people who love you will sometimes see the danger before you do. That's not because they're smarter than you. It's because love from the outside doesn't have the same blind spots as love from the inside. My sister saw Colin clearly for 2 years before I could. She told me. I didn't listen. And I don't blame myself for that anymore. But I do hold it as something important. Something I won't put down. There was a woman on a train who did not have to stop. She could have stepped over my feet, shaken her head, and gotten on with her day. Instead, she stayed. She flagged someone down. She made sure I was not left there. I have written her 2 letters. She wrote back both times. We had lunch in September. She told me she almost didn't say anything. She said she second-guessed herself for a moment, thinking maybe I was just asleep. Maybe I'd be embarrassed if she made a fuss. But something just told me, she said. So I said something. That's all it took. I think about that a lot. How many times the difference between surviving and not surviving is just one person deciding to say something instead of walking by. One person trusting their instinct over their discomfort. I'm grateful she trusted hers. I'm grateful Jesse never stopped trying to reach me, even when I told her she was wrong, even when I chose him over her, even when she had every reason to give up on the whole thing and protect herself instead. I'm grateful I kept the travel mug. I'm grateful for the red maple tree outside that kitchen window, for the photograph I took that morning, for the tiny ordinary proof that I was there and I was alive and I did not know yet what was coming. I was just a woman looking at a tree. I'm still that woman. She didn't go anywhere. She just knows a great deal more now than she did, and she is considerably harder to fool. And she has learned, slowly, imperfectly, incompletely, that the safest thing you can be is someone who believes what other people tell you when they say, "I think something is wrong." Listen to that. Please, listen to that. I used to think that betrayal was something loud, something you could see coming. A slammed door, a raised voice, a moment so obvious you'd have time to brace for it. I was wrong about that. The worst kind of betrayal is quiet. It wears your coffee mug. It smiles at you on a train platform. It says, "Text me when you get in," and means something entirely different. What Colin did to me didn't start the morning he put something in that travel mug. It started years before. Every small lie stacked on top of the last one, every performance of a loving husband layered so carefully over what he actually was that I couldn't see through it, even when the evidence was sitting right in front of me. Jessie saw it. She told me, and I chose not to believe her. Not because I was foolish, but because choosing to believe her would have cost me the life I thought I had. That's what denial really is, I think. It's not stupidity. It's self-protection that tips over into something dangerous. There's a cause and effect to everything that happened. Colin made choices, small ones and large ones, over years. And those choices built toward a specific end. And the end he got was not the one he planned. The sedative in my coffee, the insurance policy, the text with Nina, the welfare check designed to make me look unstable, every piece of that plan required him to believe he was smarter than everyone around him. That kind of arrogance is its own undoing. He didn't check my bag. He didn't account for a retired nurse who trusted her instincts over her discomfort. He didn't consider that I would keep the mug. The thing about living through something like this is that it forces you to become a person you didn't know you could be. I am not naturally a fighter. I am a woman who grows flowers and arranges them for other people's important days. But I sat in that courtroom for 9 days and I did not flinch, and I looked at the evidence clearly and I told the truth about every single thing I remembered. That required something I had to build deliberately. Not courage exactly, but a refusal to let what happened to me be the last word about who I am. Jessie never gave up on me. Even when I dismissed her, even when I told her she was wrong, she kept that photo on her phone. She stayed in my corner when I'd made it very hard for her to do that. Intelligence isn't just about being right. It's about staying present for the people you love, even when they can't hear you yet, and trusting that the moment will come when they will. I think about Deb often, the woman on the train who almost kept walking. She chose to say something instead, one decision. That's the whole distance between where I am now and something I don't let myself think about directly. The people who act on what they notice, who trust that small persistent voice that says something is wrong here, those people change outcomes. That's not dramatic. That's just true. What I know now is that integrity isn't a quality you either have or you don't. It's something you practice or fail to practice in small decisions that accumulate into a character. Colin practiced deception for years. Jessie practiced loyalty for years. Deb practiced attentiveness for years. All three of them were exactly who they'd been training themselves to be, and what happened on that train was simply the moment their characters met. I am still training myself to be someone worth being. I think that's all any of us can do.